The purpose of this presentation is to talk about copyright law and how it applies to you as designers. We'll introduce what copyright law is, what protections it provides, fair use guidelines for using resources educationally, and a better approach using Creative Commons resources and how to use those legally. This presentation does not cover things like patent law, plagiarism, or trademark. However, it will be relevant to you as you design your products. Copyright is the granting by law to authors or owners of the original creative works to control their uses for distribution and marketing. Not everything is copyrightable. The key is that copyrighted materials must be original. They also must be creative in nature, and they must be tangible. If those conditions are met, the work is copyrighted under U.S. law. If I'm sitting in a fast food restaurant and the muse strikes, and I scrawl down my poem on a bit of used napkin, because I've copied that original and creative entry in a tangible medium, the United States government has granted me copyright. What that means is, I, as the owner, have the exclusive rights to reproduce the work, prepare derivative copies, movies, anthologies, encyclopedias, distribute copies, and perform or display that work publicly. As you can see with this slide, copyright affects many things: literary works, computer software, music, choreography, drama, images, sculpture, sound recordings, to name a few. And as mentioned, there is no registration or marking of a copyright necessary in order to have that copyright. It comes automatically, though official registration provides a little more benefits to the copyright owner. You can't afford to ignore copyright laws. The cost of violation is huge. You may face monetary fines, possible jail time, certainly a lack of institutional legal support, and if nothing else, a loss of reputation and a potential loss of employment. As instructional designers, you need to make sure that your materials you develop adhere to copyright guidelines. Additionally, the claim that you're using your work for educational or scientific uses may not guarantee a lawful use of that work. Fortunately, there are some exceptions to copyright that you should be aware of. Facts and general knowledge cannot be copyrighted. It's not creative. Additionally, ideas, processes, and methods aren't copyrightable, though those ideas and processes may be protected by other laws like patent. Public domain works, anything created prior to 1923, also isn't copyrightable, and you can use those things freely. U.S. government works also aren't copyrightable, though they may subcontract out some of their works to other organizations, and those subcontracted works may have a copyright applied. There's legal exceptions to copyright. There's freeware, where people put their information in the public domain on purpose so that others can use it without going through copyright policies. Of course, there's fair use, parody and satire, and if permission is granted, then you are in compliance with copyright law. Creative Commons is a part of that permission-granted exception. Although we won't talk about all of these exceptions, I do want to focus on fair use because it's often used in educational settings. According to fair use, a person may be able to use a copyrighted work without seeking permission when it's under particular conditions. Now, while there's several guidelines that may be used in the courts, the four main ones are the purpose and character of the use, the nature of the work, the extent of the material used, and its effect on the market. When fair use is claimed, individuals look at the purpose of the copyrighted use. Was it commercial or was it educational? Did they charge admittance or was it free and open access? Was it a transformative use where they added something to it, where they made it something new, where they gave it different meaning or message? Was it critical or comparative in nature? All of these play a role in whether it will be declared fair use or not. Additionally, individuals look at the nature of the work. Was it fiction or nonfiction? Remember, facts can't be copyrighted, and so it's easier to declare fair use when you're using nonfiction works. Was it published or unpublished? Remember, copyright grants publication rights to the copyright owner, and so it's a lot harder to declare fair use if something has never been published. Lastly, is the work consumable or not? Some things are meant to be used once and then repurchased. It's harder to claim fair use when you use something again that was meant to be used only once. The extent used is also examined, and this is examined both qualitatively and quantitatively. Interestingly, there's no exact measure that exists regarding how much of a work you can use and still meet copyright guidelines. Rather, you have to look at the nature of that use, what it was for, the extent of that use, and how it aligns with your learning objectives. This is particularly problematic for images because often we want to use the entire image, the whole thing, and it's a lot harder to declare fair use when you're using the entire work. Legal experts at the University System of Georgia say any copying of an entire work usually weighs heavily against fair use. Images generate serious controversies because a user nearly always wants the full image or the full amount. A thumbnail or a low-resolution version of the image might be an acceptable amount, but the key word there is might. What may be at stake is what is known as the heart of the work, or the main point of the work. If the main point has been compromised through the use, it's hard to justify that it was a fair use, that it had no influence on the market, that it didn't breach the contract that the US government has given this copyright owner. Again, the University System of Georgia has said motion pictures are also problematic because even short clips may borrow the most extraordinary or creative elements of the work. One may also reproduce only a small portion of any work, but still take the heart of the work. In the movie Citizen Kane, a media mogul dies and his dying words are Rosebud. And so the entire movie tries to follow what in the world does Rosebud mean. In the end, we find out. If I took that clip where we discover what Rosebud is, it could be argued that I'm taking the heart of the work. There's no reason to watch the rest of the movie. Lastly, people look at the effect on the market to determine if a copyrighted use is a fair use. Does it interfere with the owner's ability to make a profit? Does the user own a lawful copy of the work? All of these play a role into whether it will be declared fair use or infringement. The University System of Georgia has developed a nice checklist to help educators determine if they can use fair use for copyrighted items. I encourage you to scan the QR code or go to the URL and examine this document. Here's a scenario you might find yourself in as you consider fair use. If you want to copy a Shakespearean play from a copyrighted anthology, can you do so? The answer may be more complicated than you think. Certainly the play is in the public domain. It was definitely published before 1923. But any accompanying photographs, textual explanations, literary terms, etc., may be copyrighted material, and you may get in trouble using that from the anthology. The play itself is in the public domain. The extra material may not be. In another example, a teacher has posted class notes to a public website and also wants to scan an article from a peer-reviewed journal and add that to the site. Is that teacher able to do that? Using the 4-point checklist, the answer is probably not. Although the teacher wants to provide the material, the resource, to their students, it's unclear whether they're the only ones who can access this content. In fact, because their website is public, anyone can access it. And so it's hard to claim this is a fair use for educational resources. This is one of the reasons learning management systems are so popular, because it better guarantees that only students in the class have access to the materials being posted. So then what about using a picture on a website, or in a presentation, or including music in a movie? What about including video in a movie? Posting things to YouTube? Some of the many things that we do as designers. How do we balance copyright and helping our clients get the information and resources they need to meet their students' needs? One of the problems with copyright law is that you need permission in order to use it effectively, and it can be difficult to locate who can grant you permission to use a work, and it may be hard to pay their price in order to use it under license. Yet fair use guidelines are also problematic because you would only ever claim a fair use if you were being sued for copyright infringement in a court of law. Obviously, we don't want to get there in the first place. Fortunately, there may be another way. Wouldn't it be nice if people who owned copyright could grant uses to particular purposes or individuals without them needing to ask for permission? What if you could create an image, for example, and just say, hey, I want this group of people to use it, but if you want to gain commercial benefit from it, you need to talk to me about a license. Creative Commons tries to set that up. In that sense, it works with the permissions of copyright law, but it gives those permissions automatically to individuals who follow their guidelines. You might want to scan the QR code or follow the URL to find more information about these licenses. However, there are basically 4 different types of licenses. The first one, attribution, is the broadest. It says you can use this work for any reason, even sell it, so long as you indicate who is the original author of that work. A second one is non-commercial. You may use it, distribute it, display it, do whatever with it, but you can't do it for commercial purposes. The No Derivatives Works license means that you can't change the content in any way. And the share alike means that if you do change content, you have to license your own content under the original license of that original work. Additionally, Creative Commons allows individuals to group licenses together. And so you can say, I want anyone to be able to use this work so long as it's non-commercial, but they need to give me attribution. Or, I want anyone to use this work as long as it's non-commercial and they can't change anything. So there is a no derivatives license attached to it as well. In this sense, they give content creators a full gamut of expectations of how they want others to use their work and what they need to do in order to use it legally. Regardless of the license, you have to provide attribution. In fact, the best way to provide attribution is to indicate what the title of the work is, who it's by, and what are the license agreements you're using it under. So for an example, if I took a picture and didn't name it, I could title it Untitled by Craig Shepard, and then I would indicate what license I was using. If possible, I would link back to the original source, to the author, and to the license. However, there are some media that's not possible. For example, print or video. However, I would do the best I could to indicate this is the original source, this is who owns it, and this is the agreements I have to use it. Remember, from an instructional design perspective, documentation is key. Over-document. If you're using public domain works, or if you're using Creative Commons images, make sure you have paper copies of those agreements and know exactly what those agreements are. Also keep in mind, you will likely have to educate clients and stakeholders what Creative Commons and public domain images are, how to find them, and what license agreements they have as they use them for their professional works. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I don't have a background in copyright law, and there's a lot more nuances to copyright, Creative Commons, and fair use than what I've provided. But this should give you a sense of how you can use several resources available online to make your design projects easier to manage and easier to maintain.